The arms are interesting to work with because we all use our arms and hands to do rather intricate things every day. As a result, we are better at manipulating our arms and hands than we are at manipulating our torso, which is something most people haven't thought much about. This means we should be able to make significant adjustments to the arms much more easily. But there's also a downside to our familiarity with using our arms and hands. And that is that we have very strong habits. Very, very strong habits. This means that, particularly in the beginning, small movements, if they go against what's habitual for you, will seem strangely impossible. While we're familiar with the end of the arm where the hand is, we may not be so familiar with the other end. So let's look at where the arm begins. At the front, we have the clavicle or collarbone, which connects to the upper sternum. We've looked at the upper sternum in the series about the torso. What's happening there is going to have a significant effect on the arms. At the back, we have the scapula or shoulder blade, which sits on the side of the rib cage. The scapula and the clavicle connect to form the shoulder girdle. The bone of the upper arm, called the humerus, connects to the scapula. Below, we have the elbow, the forearm, the wrist, which is a collection of jointed bones to allow for many different axes of rotation, and the hand with its fingers and thumb. There is tons of posture advice out there to combat a problem that is called rounded shoulders. The claim is that people have their shoulders and arms too far forward. You've likely heard this before, and nearly everyone who first begins to look at their posture comes to believe they have rounded shoulders. The general claim about rounded shoulders is that people use their arms out in front of them to do many things throughout the day, including to type on the computer or use their phone. Because people use their arms out in front of them so much, people have a difficult time pulling their arms back. Their arms become rounded forward. Often, exercises and stretches where you pull your arms back are advised to combat this problem. This sounds right enough to most people. We associate a stretch of the arms backwards with a kind of relief to our back. People certainly feel like there's a pull forward at the front of their body, like they can't seem to get themselves upright enough. But there are two major sticking points that make this idea of rounded shoulders highly suspect. First, we can observe the people around us. We can do our best impression of Francois Delsarte and go out and observe our fellow man. And what you will find if you do is that people very frequently rest with their arms behind their back. When a person is tired, they've been running or playing a sport, they will often rest with their hands on the side of their ribs, with their elbows and shoulders very far back. This is rather odd. If people have rounded shoulders and have a difficult time keeping their arms back, to the point that they're advised to do exercises and stretches to get more used to pulling their arms back, why is it that people have such an easy time resting with their arms pulled way back? Wouldn't we expect people to rest with their arms and shoulders very far forward? Wouldn't we expect when they're tired that they would fall into their habit? Again, if they need stretches and exercises just to help them build the muscles that pull their arms back, why do they easily pull their arms very far back when they're tired? From what I've seen, it's a fact that when people are tired, they will tend to go into their habits. If someone habitually slumps, they will slump more than usual when they're tired. So when people rest with their arms behind their back, or they go into this posture when they're tired, I don't think they're doing these movements intentionally to combat their normal bad posture where their shoulders are rounded forward. I think people find these postures with their arms pulled back to be comfortable, familiar, habitual, which would imply that people don't have a difficult time pulling their shoulders and arms back. The second major sticking point is that observation reveals people simply do not have their shoulders or arms forward, and instead, we see that people tend to have their shoulders and arms pulled back. If we look at common postures that are often said to have rounded shoulders, we see people who have their chest forward, their lower sternum, lower ribs, and abdomen forward, but their shoulders and arms are not forward. If we look at examples that purport to show a transformation to good posture, we see that people do indeed pull their arms back to assume this so-called good posture. Often we see the elbows pulled back behind the body. Is that good? Should your elbows be behind your body? Should your shoulders be this far back in relation to your chest? We can also rephrase that and ask, should your chest be this far in front of your shoulders? If the answer is no, then your shoulders are not rounding forward of your torso, they're pulled back in relation to your torso. Where is your arm in relation to the frontal plane of your body, which we will recall is the plane of the front of the rib cage? We see in everyone something similar. We see the upper arm behind the frontal plane, we see the elbow behind the frontal plane, and we see the wrist and hand forward of the frontal plane. That tells us one thing for sure. The arm is bent. Because if the arm was straight, it would either be entirely behind or in front of the frontal plane. But it's not. The upper arm is pulled back, and the forearm angles forward. Is the arm supposed to be bent like this? It's certainly common, but does this make sense? Shouldn't your arm hang with gravity and be vertically straight? Does pulling your arm back make it straighter or more bent? Give this some thought and then join me next episode, and we'll close the case on rounded shoulders and begin to take a reasoned approach to understanding the postural problems that exist in the arm.